Hello friends, once again in this series of video lectures we are studying active and passive voice. My name is Dr. Atul Goswami. I am working as an assistant professor in Engineering College Bikaner, and today we'll study what are the conditions in which we prefer the use of passive voice. In the last lectures we have touched some parts which are very important whenever we attempt any sentence from active to passive. The first thing we need to know is what is an active voice and what is a passive voice. Whenever a subject does something on the object, it is called active voice, and whenever something is being done on the object, it is called passive voice. The second thing which we must understand if we want to change any sentence from active to passive is what is a transitive verb, because only those sentences which contain transitive verbs can be changed into passive. In the third lecture we understood that how can we make changes in different tenses like simple present, present continuous, present perfect continuous, and simple past, past continuous and past perfect. And we also understood that no sentence which is in perfect continuous tense can be changed into passive. So in this lecture we'll just try to understand what are the conditions in which we prefer the use of passive voice, because just the knowledge that a sentence can be changed from active to passive is not enough. In this lecture I'll tell you that what are those conditions in which passive is preferred. So let me take a very simple example. If you notice your day-to-day conversation, my question is that how many times do you use passive voice? Then if we observe, we just find that we do not use passive voice a lot. For example, if somebody asks me what is my profession, I never say English is taught by me, which is in passive voice. I always say I teach English. So what is the reason? The reason is that in theory this sentence can be changed into passive, but if I speak in passive it won't look good. And there's one more reason, that sometimes in our efforts or in this attempt to change active to passive, we make a sentence look less beautiful and we are using more words to convey the same meaning. Let me take an example. If I say I teach English, so this is something which can be said into very simple three words: I teach English. But suppose if I change it into passive, then I'll have to use more than three words, and my sentence structure will be English is taught by me. So when I can express whatever I want to say in three simple words, where is the need to use 5 words? So just the knowledge that a sentence can be changed from active to passive is not enough. We also need to know that what are the conditions in which we prefer the use of active and passive voice. The first condition is that whenever we just find that the doer of the action is somebody who is, let's say, which is very much obvious, then we prefer the use of passive. For example, in a sentence like people speak English all over the world, we all know that we all have heard this sentence in passive. English is spoken all over the world. The reason is that its subject is something that is not obvious. That is very much obvious. For example, we all know that English as a subject is spoken by people only. So when we know that this action is done by a particular subject only, or this is something that can be done by a particular group of people only or group of subject only, then there is no need to mention the doer of the action. That is why all those sentences which have people as a subject are mostly preferred in passive. The second reason is that sometimes it happens that because of some psychological reasons we do not want to take responsibility for some action which have some negative repercussion. For example, if I am running a company and if I decide to fire an employee, then I will just write that you have been fired, though I can write it in the same active voice also that I am firing you or I have decided to fire you. But both the sentences will have different effect on that employee. If I say that you have been fired, that in that case I am disowning the responsibility. Why? Because I know that this action will not be welcomed by the employee. But if I am doing something like that, let's say that I have decided to promote that employee, then in that case I'll prefer the use of active voice, and I'll just write that I have decided to promote you. What is the difference? The difference is psychological in reason or nature. Whenever I just find that my action will have some negative effect on the speaker, I want to disown the responsibility. But whenever I just find that my word will have some positive effect on the speaker, I want to be the reason behind that action. So we can understand it by using a very simple English proverb which says that success has many fathers but failure is an orphan. So whenever we want to take responsibility for any action, we prefer the use of active voice. But whenever we want to disown responsibility for any action, we prefer the voice of prefer passive voice. So just to remind you, you must have used these type of sentences in your childhood also. Whenever you are complaining to your parents like mummy khilona toot gaya hai. So this is a perfect example of passive. Why? Because you know that if you take that responsibility that you have taken, you have broken that toy, that you may or you may not get the toy again. So all children are very smart when it comes to using active and passive. They know that what are the conditions in which they can disown responsibilities, and this is something that goes on when we become adults also. There is one more case in which we prefer the use of active to passive. Whenever we are more interested in the result of the action than the action itself, then we prefer the use of passive voice. But whenever we are more interested in the doer of the action, we prefer the use of active voice. For example, if there is a flat or there is a house next to my home which is empty and which has been sold, then there are two ways in which I can describe the situation. If I just find that that house has been bought by somebody, so I'll just use that the house next door or next to my home has been bought, because my focus is on the result of the action, not on the doer of the action. But suppose the house next to my home has been bought by my brother, then my sentence will be my brother has bought the house next door. Why? Because in this sentence I am more interested in the doer of the action. So whenever our focus is on the doer of the action, we prefer the use of active, and whenever our focus is on the result of the action, we prefer the use of passive. One more case in which we prefer the use of passive is that when we do not want to show who is the doer of the action. So suppose if you ask me after the examination, sir, who is checking my answer sheets? So I will never, as a responsible teacher, I will never tell you who is the person who is teaching or who is checking your answer or evaluating your answer sheets, because in that case you might go to that person and try to change the results. So my answer will be your answer sheets are being evaluated. Quite possible that I know who is evaluating your answer sheets, but because it is a matter of secrecy, that's why I will not reveal you the person who is doing this. So the one more case in which we prefer the use of passive voice is when we do not want to name the person who is doing a particular action, either because of secrecy or because of any other reason. Sometimes it is also possible that we have forgotten about the person who is doing certain action, and that is why we use passive voice. For example, if I have forgotten who killed Mahatma Gandhi, then I would say that Mahatma Gandhi was killed, instead of saying that who killed him, because quite possible because of some memory loss I have forgotten the person who killed Mahatma Gandhi. So one more condition in which we prefer the use of active to in which we prefer the use of passive is when the subject of an active verb is words like someone, somebody, you, will, you, we, etc. Because all these subjects are impersonal in nature, they do not tell us exactly the person who is doing some action. For example, if I take the example of the pronoun we, then this pronoun is a pronoun which can be used for two people and it can be used for thousands of people. These are basically impersonal pronouns. So whenever the subject of any active verb is an impersonal pronoun like we, you, they, or words like someone, somebody, etc., then also we prefer the use of passive voice. For example, the better way to say this sentence that somebody has stolen my bike, the best way or the preferable way to say this sentence is that my bike has been stolen. Why? Because someone or somebody is an unidentified subject. So these are the conditions in which we prefer the use of active to passive. One more condition, that whenever you are writing your scientific theories, you must have noticed that you are using passive voice. Why? Because in science, whatever experiment is being conducted, it does not depend on the person who is conducting the experiment. Any person under the same situations, using the same type of material, using the same type of instruments, can reach to the same conclusion. So in science, the doer is never ever important, and that is why we just find that whenever we are describing any scientific experiments, we always use the passive voice. So just to recap once again, there are certain conditions in which we prefer the use of active to passive. Just changing a sentence from active to passive is not enough until and unless we know that what is the reason behind changing this sentence from active to passive. So the conditions in which we prefer the use of passive voice are: first, whenever the subject of an active verb is words like people, someone, somebody, they, we, you, etc. Second, when we are more interested in the result of the action rather than action itself or the doer of the action. Third, when we do not know or we do not want to reveal the identity of the person who is doing some action. Fourth, when because of psychological reasons we do not want to claim responsibility for some action which may have some negative repercussions. And fifth, whenever we are using or conducting some scientific experiments. So these are basically 5 conditions in which we prefer the use of active to passive. Until and unless we know it, we will go on changing the sentences from active to passive without even realizing that whether it is the preferable way of changing from active to passive or not. So just keep in mind that active to passive is just for exercise. We are given certain simple sentences from active to passive, but these are just exercises and they are not used in our day-to-day life. And whenever it comes to day-to-day life, we need to understand that these are the 5 conditions which I have just told in which we prefer the use of passive. Thank you very much.